Men rape and murder. Not all men. Besides, you feminists just hate men. Not all feminists. The YouTubers NoahPlum99 and ToolTime9901, which is a lot of nines between the two of them, recently had a video exchange discussing the phrase, "not all men." And I wanted to comment on this because I feel like these two YouTubers are talking past each other, which is a shame because I think they are both very good thinkers. So what I wanted to do with this video is to delve into what I think is going on and what I think people are trying to argue for when they say things like, "not all men do this," and "not all feminists are like that." When a person says something like, "men rape" or "men murder," obviously they don't mean all men, every single man. But they also don't mean just 2 men, or 100 men, or even 1,000 men. What I think they mean is that a sufficiently large portion of men do these things, or, depending on who you talk to, at least passively encourage these things, such that it is appropriate to identify these as problems with not the individual men themselves, but with men as a group or masculinity as an idea. And this claim, I think, is directly tied to feminist theories of toxic masculinity and rape culture, where, again, even if you are a normal, respectable man who does not do these things, you can still contribute to the rape culture or contribute to toxic ideas about masculinity, which, the argument goes, both have a causal relationship to real-world rapes and those men who do rape. Again, not all men do these things, not all men encourage these things, but, the argument goes, enough do. A bit of a side note here, depending on which feminist you talk to, sometimes they very well do mean all men. For example, this author of A Gentleman's Guide to Rape Culture, who says that by simply being male, you contribute to the rape culture. This is definitely a time where, even though the author does not use the qualifier all, they are clearly talking about all men. So, when people say, "not all men," in response to statements like, "men do X and men do Y," what I think they are trying to communicate, albeit poorly, is no. Contrary to what you think, this is not a problem with men as a group, and treating men with suspicion and contempt will not help. I think the people who say, "not all men," are expressing their disagreement with this kind of generalized collectivist approach that many modern feminists often take toward men. And I think this disagreement is actually a subset of the broader disagreement with the feminist models of toxic masculinity and rape culture, which often can and do implicate all men with these things, either by doing them themselves or by inspiring them through toxic masculinity and rape culture, to which people, I think fairly correctly, say, "not all men," although the phrasing has much to be desired. And it seems that this is a large reason why feminists like Wendy McElroy are largely excommunicated from the modern feminist movement, because they reject this kind of collectivist approach that the phrase "not all men" is employed to argue against. However, in the same conversation where you hear the phrase "not all men," you often hear a very similar retort from the other side saying, "not all feminists are like that." What's going on? A minute ago you were perfectly content to treat men as a collective group. Why are you so opposed to treating feminists like a collective group? Once again, I think this is a case of taking issue with what you believe to be an inaccurate generalization. And I think this is really where a lot of these types of arguments often originate. Is there a problem with masculinity or just individual men? Is there a problem with feminist theory or just individual feminists? Is there a problem with Islam or just individual Muslims? Is there a problem with Christianity or just individual Christians who, for example, hate gay people? This is ultimately what I think both sides are getting at when they say things like "not all men" and "not all feminists." They're taking issue with what they believe to be an inaccurate and inflammatory generalization that will not solve the problem. So to respond by saying something like, "I never said all men," or "I never said all feminists," really misses both your point and theirs. They're not taking issue with your choice of qualifying adjectives. They're taking issue with the utility and accuracy of your generalization of men or feminists. and they're arguing for a critique of the individuals of that group rather than for a critique of the ideology that those individuals stand on.